frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Oh, excuse me for that last whoosh of air. Must have been something I ate. Welcome to Star Trek? No, Mysterious Goings-On, Chapter 19, Where No One Has Gone Before. I'm your host, J. Alexander Greenwood, and this episode we're talking a little bit about something called Star Trek. Specifically, Star Trek Beyond, the 13th film in the Star Trek saga. If you're not a Star Trek fan, this little mini episode of the podcast may not appeal to you, but hang with me a minute. I'm a pretty opinionated guy when it comes to Star Trek, particularly because I'm probably what you'd call a second generation Trekker. I was alive during the show's run, but I didn't really get into it until it got into reruns in the early 70s. And I have been through that show, thick and thin, from the original series to the animated series. Yeah, there was a cartoon, if you didn't know that, through the motion pictures, and then Star Trek The Next Generation, and then my personal favorite, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and then the Trek that I absolutely loathed, which is Star Trek Voyager. Ugh. And then the Trek that a lot of people hate that I think was actually pretty good towards the end, which was Enterprise. And then that led us to the movies kind of petering out after the Next Generation film called Nemesis, which suffered from Stuart Baird, a really good film editor who is a lousy director, and he knew nothing about Star Trek, and he kind of put the nail in the coffin. Fast forward to about 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, maybe 5, and maybe it was more than that. It could have been 6, when JJ Abrams, who created Lost, or at least produced Lost and Alias and some pretty good stuff, took over the reins for Star Trek and rebooted it. And he did it kind of in a clever way. He didn't totally jettison a link between the old Trek and the new. He brought Leonard Nimoy, also known as Spock, into the fold, and Spock served as a bridge between old Trek, or Prime Trek, as a lot of us call it, and the alternate universe Trek, which is what JJ, also called the JJ verse, which is what JJ produces. Well, when I saw the first Star Trek movie that JJ had directed and done, I thought it was clever and fun, and I loved seeing Nimoy and the way they lovingly tied it to the old series, mostly. There were some things I thought were stupid, and I was a little dismayed that it was basically an action flick, not real thoughtful. But apparently these days science fiction has to be full of fighting and battles and stuff, or it's just not going to go anywhere, because that seems to be the trend, at least for right now. Anyway, so I was encouraged by that, and then a couple years ago they came out with Star Trek Into Darkness, which infuriated me in the theater. I am sitting there gripping the handrests, kind of like that scene from a George C. Scott movie. I forget what it was called, where he's found out his daughter worked in porno, and he's sitting there in a theater with it, just gripping those the seat, and the armrest of the seat. I forget the name of the movie, but anyway, that was me about Into Darkness, because it was the most lazy, cheap writing I had seen in years. They basically just stole the best parts of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which is probably not even arguably, but probably is the best film in the entire Star Trek series of films. And they just stole a few things, flipped a few things over, did silly things with the characters, just cheap, obvious fan service where they felt they needed to, and then mix in a lot of fighting and blowing crap up, and it was just awful. And that was it. I wrote it off. I was like, I'm done. They have taken my thoughtful, beloved Star Trek, this journey about exploration, Shatner opening you just heard at the beginning of the show. That says it all. This is a show about exploration. There is action, there is adventure, but it's about exploration, and it's actually a metaphor for what's going on in the world today. So Into Darkness became this meditation on terrorism, and they wanted to make sure Benedict Cumberbatch got in there, and he ended up, sorry, spoiler alert, playing Khan, which made no sense whatsoever. They'd never heard of him, so they FaceTime Nimoy, and they're asking him, they FaceTime Spock Prime and said, do you know of this Khan person? And just gratuitous cameo that made no sense. And anyway, I could go on for a long time about how much I hated Star Trek Into Darkness. So here's what you do. There's plenty of people and plenty of videos. Just Google Star Trek Into Darkness, terrible or bad, or pick any negative adjective, and you'll find a plethora of stuff that explain it very well, much better than I could. But my main issue was poor writing and an absolute disregard for the respect for the intelligence of the fans. And I said, that's it. I don't care how many more they make. I'm not watching. Okay, well, Star Trek Beyond comes along a few months ago, about a month ago, and I'm not going. People are like, are you going to go? And I'm like, I don't think so. And well, long story short, I went. My wife and I had a free night where the kid was at the grandparents, and we didn't have anything to do. We looked at all the other movies out there. Nothing looked all that interesting, and my wife kind of wanted to see this movie. I think she digs the new Captain Kirk or something. I'm not sure. But I said, look, I'll go, and I promise I won't sit there and complain about the movie. I'll just pretend like it's an action film that's kind of like Star Trek and leave it at that. Well, I'll just tell you now, here's the verdict. As a film overall, 3 out of 5 stars. As a Star Trek film, 3 out of 5 stars. If you give me the first JJ film, I would give it 3.5 out of 5, maybe 4 out of 5. I would give Star Trek Into Darkness 1.5 out of 5. So this movie was so much more thoughtful, so much more intelligent, so much truer to Trek than Into Darkness. I was very pleased with that. And there were some moving fan service things that didn't feel over the top, like heartstring pulling grabs for your, for your feet, anyway, I'm not being incredibly, for a writer, I'm not being incredibly clear here, but Trek is just something that's meant a lot to me in my life. It's not too big a statement to say that it informed my personal philosophy and had some influence on my politics. It had, when I was a kid, Kirk and Spock and Scotty and McCoy and the gang, they were like my friends. I watched these shows whenever they were rerun, and Star Trek became kind of that video comfort food, And then when the new stuff came along, I quickly adapted like a Borg. I adapted to the next generation and have a great respect for what that show did. Might remind you that the Next Generation in its final season was nominated for an Emmy for Best Dramatic Series. Pretty big deal. And Deep Space Nine, don't get me started. In fact, stay tuned. I heard there's some good podcasts about Deep Space Nine, which I'll share some information on those when I dig that up. But Star Trek just means a lot to me. I think here it is, it's 50 years old this year. It's a very important part of my life, without getting ridiculous. It's not more important than my family or my career or anything, but it's an important part of what informs my being to a degree, and I don't like somebody screwing with it the way JJ Abrams has. So damning Star Trek Beyond with faint praise by saying it's a lot better than the shittiest movie of the three that he and his team have made may not be kind, but I call him like I see him. The pacing was good, the editing was good, the writing was decent. There were some really nice character moments. Nice to see Spock and McCoy doing their act, together. There was some good stuff there, and some hope, I think, for what will undoubtedly be another episode or another movie in this series. It's no Star Trek 2, and I guess the other thing is there's never going to be another one. That was at a moment in time. It had a certain cast. It had some damn good writers and a director who was inspired. And, now Star Trek is, the old joke was it was Star Trek 90210. And now it's just like Star Trek Fast and the Furious. It's just, it's action. But this one had just enough humanity injected into the action that I found it enjoyable. So, very sad about Anton Yelchin, who played Chekhov. I mean, very talented young actor who had a freak accident a few months ago after he finished this picture. It was kind of bittersweet to see him up there. And there was mention of Leonard Nimoy, who we lost last year as well. So that was bittersweet, but handled with a deft hand. Very well done. All right. Well, I've rambled on. I guess now you know how I feel about Star Trek Beyond. And I've lightened up a little, Francis. All right. Well, that's all for this episode. Again, if you have comments, go to the John Pilot Mysteries Facebook page and let me know what you think. And we'll be back soon with another chapter of Mysterious Goings On. I'm trying to get a guest on here, and I'd love to get a guest to talk to me about Star Trek who could probably help me better flesh out all my objections to the JJ verse. And that's not to say, by the way, that the previous movies, all of them were incredible. Star Trek V, anyone? Anyone? Star Trek Insurrection? Anyone? Ugh. Although I do have a soft spot for the first one. Some call it Star Trek The Motionless Picture. There's some good stuff in there, though, still. All right. This has been Mysterious Goings On. I'm J. Alexander Greenwood. Visit the mothership at pilotscross.com. And until next time, live long and prosper.
Jingle bell, jingle bell. Nothing flies by faster than the holidays. Actually, the Lexus December to Remember sales event also goes by fast, featuring extraordinary offers on our most popular models.
Lease the 2019 UX250 Hybrid for $319 a month for 36 months with $39.99 due at signing. Experience amazing at your New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Lexus dealer. Call 1-800-USA-LEXUS for important lease offer and pricing details. Not all customers will qualify. Offer valid in the Lexus Eastern area only and ends December 2nd, 2019.
Buckle up, because Metro is bringing you the best deal in wireless. Switch to Metro and get your choice of 2 awesome free phones from top brands like Samsung and LG with huge HD screens and tons of memory for all your pics and videos. So hurry into Metro and get your awesome free phones only at Metro. Plus sales tax and activation fee. Requires port-in of eligible number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. Limit 4 per account or household. Restrictions apply. See store for details and terms and conditions.